I talked with a person several years ago. When I say several, probably 10 years ago. This person was having an extramarital affair that became public knowledge, at least public to enough people that it wasn't a secret anymore. And this person, in the midst of the affair, didn't know whether he really wanted to call it off. To my surprise, his wife was actually, holding a little bit of a flame out that, we could put all this behind us and not throw away a lot of years of marriage and, the memories, and we can move forward. But this person was this wasn't just about an affair. This was about a midlife crisis breakdown on multiple fronts. The affair was just one of those things. A lot of times we do carnal things in the attempt to take back power when we feel that we're out of control or life has taken from us. We wake up one day and realize, I've lost a piece of me, and so we go out and go, well, I'm going to take it back. And we don't always do the greatest of things in order to take that back. So I was involved in the situation to the degree that I was a sounding board for both parties, but more so for this man because of other things he was going through. Not just the affair issue, but for other things he was going through. And he was like, I just really don't think I want marriage anymore. I really don't think I want this anymore. I really don't think And I was like, okay, well, that's your prerogative. You can move on. But he would keep making this statement about his then wife. And he'd say, well, I just don't want to hurt her. And he made that statement about 2 or 3 times. And I finally looked at him one day when he made the statement again. And I said to him, you already have. You've just rubbed her nose in an infidelity. And not only confessed to it, but you've been like, yeah, ha, you caught me, whoopee-doo. I was like, you already have hurt her. And he pauses. He doesn't really say much. He calls me on the phone later that day. He's like, that really registered. Yeah, you're right. I already have. And I said, well, then what's the struggle? He goes, I don't really want to see it. That's not the perspective I want to have of even my own actions. Now here's why I'm starting off tonight talking about this. Because part of maturing, we've been talking about living out of our spirit. When you don't have a strong spirit and have immaturity that rules you. Kind of the two don't gel. So as your spirit matures, the rest of you matures, because everything that matures our spirit, our core, translates through our behavior. Whether how we deal with anger, how we deal with pain, how we deal with loss, how we deal with rejection, how we deal with past, how we deal with failure, how we deal with where we feel like we've lost power and we need to take it back. When something matures about how we live out of our spirit, it translates down through our behavior. And part of our maturing process, and you can write this down, part of maturing, not maturity, but maturing. And I say the word maturing because we're in process. Path of the righteous, like the light of dawn, grows brighter and brighter to the full day. We are in process. Part of maturing is owning the truth of what our fruit says. Part of maturing, my kids always make fun of the way I pronounce that word. Part of potato, part of maturing is when we own the truth of what our fruit says. The fruit of our actions, the fruit of our behavior. This person that I referred to in the beginning didn't want to deal with the truth. He didn't want to own the truth that he was hurting this person. If you don't want to be married to somebody, that's fine. You know, you're a at-will person. But to hurt them as a result of letting them know you no longer want to be married to them. This person kept talking in futuristic. I don't want to. You already have. I don't want to spend too much on, well, the receipt would indicate you already have. I don't want to, everything's in this future. Because why do we when we don't own the truth, we put a lot of things in terms that are separate from us. So we don't have to deal with it. Part of maturing is owning the truth of what our fruit says. When Jesus spoke in his ministry, how did he say you'd know people? You would know people by their fruit. He's trying to explain in Matthew the difference between being spiritual, directed by God, and being religious. And how does he do it? Does he give a 3-week message on the difference between spirit and religious? No. He just simply takes the people who have a hunger to be spiritual, and he says, now look at these Pharisees over here. And he compares the two. In other words, he said, here's their fruit. They wash the outside of the cup, but the fruit of their actions and behavior reveal that the inside of the cup is still dirty. And he goes down the line from their fruit. That's how he didn't take it too personal when Peter was going to betray him. He didn't necessarily take it that personal of sorts, because he measured what Peter had good intentions to do from what Peter had the fruit of doing. Peter had the fruit in his behavior of a passive-aggressive person who had never taken ownership of his life assignment. So Jesus was like, if you can't take ownership of your life assignment, you're not going to know what to do when mine is in the heat of the moment and I'm being betrayed at the hands of men so that my purpose can be fulfilled. Peter's like, oh, no. We're going to go to death. I mean, we'll go to death. We'll go to the death with you. Jesus is like, no, you won't. Here's your fruit. Part of maturing is owning the truth of what our fruit says. When you don't own the truth, there's not going to be a reality between your actions and your good intentions. In other words, your actions are going to say one thing, your good intentions are going to say another. Does that make sense to everyone?
There's no reality between.
Yeah, there's no direct correlation. The two don't parallel. You have your actions and your good intentions. When you don't own the truth, when I own the truth in something, then even if I fell short in something, I now have given myself the platform to fix it. I can course correct pretty much anything on a dime and head it in the right direction. And then I'm not forced to try to cover it all up and do damage control out of, well, my intention was. You get the picture. Write this down. What our fruit says that we do is exactly what we are doing. What our fruit says we do is exactly what we're doing. So what in the world does that mean? You're like the person who beats your girlfriend or beats your wife or beats your kids and then says, you don't believe you have an anger issue. You're the person who never shows up for work on time, but you don't believe you have a time management problem. You're the person who doesn't really follow through or keep your word very much, but you don't believe that you have an integrity issue. You need to understand that what our fruit says we do is exactly what we do. People say, how do you know if you can trust somebody? A person's actions tell you exactly what they want you to know about them and believe about them. A person's actions tell you exactly what... Somebody tells me 2 or 3 times that they're going to do something for me and it never happens. What they're saying to me is, I never want you to take me serious. I want you to like me. I want you to treat me like you trust me. But don't take me serious. Now, here's the deal. You can change any history. What is history? History is that which is behind us. History is never in front of us. You can change any history the moment you change your fruit. You can make changes in the fruit you display. I can get into an argument with my wife and change my fruit of how I handle frustration, how I handle being misunderstood, how I handle feeling criticized, how I handle misunderstanding. I can change my fruit and how I handle something and immediately head my entire life in the right direction. What are they doing now with this terrible... Does that make sense, by the way? So I don't want you to go away from this saying, well, I have this area in my life. I've screwed it up more times than I can imagine. Excuse me. Sinus cold. I don't want you to go away because we all have that area of our lives. My area might be different than yours, might be different than yours. But we all have that area. But here's the deal. History is only what we allow to keep repeating itself. Negative history is only what we allow to keep repeating ourselves. And how do we allow something to keep repeating itself? By doing the same thing in the same situation. The moment I want to change history, I change what my fruit will produce. The moment I want to change history, I change what it is my fruit will produce. Does that make sense? Are you hearing me? All right. Let's touch base, because this is the last night I'll talk about this, about living out of your spirit. I'll probably refer to it in the coming weeks and months, because living out of your spirit is absolutely pivotal in how you live a very functional, very mature, very fruitful, very prosperous life. The spirit does not know the same things as the soul realm. There are things you experience and you feel and you encounter in your soul that must be brought over to the doorstep of the spirit and left right there. And the spirit must engage and rule by the bigger picture, not the feelings, not the emotions, not the disappointments, not the paranoia, not the speculation, not all of that, not the drama. So let's review a couple things from last week, because I want to add a couple things. First of all, I told you this last week. when we live from our spirit, what our spirit says to us. What does it mean to live from your spirit? You're living in tune with your internal intuition of not your emotions, your spirit. The Spirit of God that connects with you. What your spirit tells you is not necessarily what you're supposed to be telling everybody else. Now in church or religious circles, we get this all wrong, and it's called divination. You know what divination is? It's when I attempt to manipulate you from something I say is from my spirit that I need you to adhere to. Well, I'm going to dismantle a little bit of that just through some of the Apostle Paul's writings in a minute. Churches in America, especially the ones I grew up in the Pentecostal, charismatic, evangelical circles, are just chock full of it. Even people in little groups, they're disenfranchised. They're functioned by pain. They function by greed. They function by inferiority. Oh, well, I got this in my spirit. And, it becomes this form of manipulation. How? By you need to get the same thing in your spirit. You need to agree with me. You need to follow me. I need to take something I got in my spirit and convince you that you better do the same thing. That's called manipulation. In spiritual terms, it's called divination. When anybody ever been on the receiving end of that? That's fun. When the Apostle Paul spoke to people in his ministry, you look at so many different examples of when he spoke to people. He challenged the independence of people. Let me give you some examples. He speaks to the church at Thessalonica, and he says to do what? As far as teaching, as far as doctrine, as far as all this. He speaks vertically, and he says, prove all things, hold fast to that which is good. In other words, even if I say it, you prove it to yourself and hold fast to the parts that are good for you. Why? Because what's good for her might not be good for you. Why? Not because you're better than her. It's just you're at different places in your journey. You're at different needs in your journey. He speaks in this vertical language. He speaks to his spiritual son, Timothy. And the whole first and second book of Timothy is all Paul challenging the independent soul of Timothy. Work hard, study to show yourself approved. Be a good, study to endure. Be a good soldier of the gospel. Don't fall prey to getting involved in myths and wives' tales and endless genealogies and things that foster, religious, it goes nowhere. Stir up the gift that's within you. Don't forget what was instilled in you by your aunt and your mother. And he's challenging Timothy to become independent. He's not challenging Timothy to be Paul Jr. He's not challenging the church at Thessalonica to, I am a man of God. You need to listen to me because I'm sent and I've got the answer. He's not. Prove all things, hold fast. Now get this. You have all these examples of Paul talking like this. He doesn't even tell people what they need to do in order to consider themselves qualified for eternal life. He just tells people what he's done. I beat myself up in my flesh so that after I've preached to many, I won't be disqualified. I inflict conflict on myself so that I keep my focus clear, so that I don't fall for this, fall that. He didn't say, you better do that too or else you're not as saved as me. He just said, this is what I do. He's talking vertically. He's encouraging people to consider things. He tells the Corinthian church, he goes, you might want to consider forgiving each other of offenses and trespasses, because Satan is going to use unforgiveness against you. We're not ignorant of his devices. He didn't make a doctrine out of it. He didn't write a best-selling book and go on TBN and say, here's what God's saying to this generation. If I hear one more preacher trying to get on television saying, here's what God is saying to this generation, I don't watch, the reason I have no broken TVs in my house is I don't watch Christian television. I would throw things through them. But that's all it is. You get one guy going, well, we're an Elijah generation. Then it's the Joshua generation. Well, we're a Paul generation. We're in a dispensation of this and that. I'm living my life. I don't really give a rat's tail what dispensation you think we're in. I'm living my life. Trying to raise kids, trying to be a good husband, trying to feed hungry people, and trying to build a prototype of something that leaves its mark of influence to a community. And go to some ball games and some concerts and enjoy one of the best places to live in the planet in the process. Who's with me? Let's create a doctrine out of it. No. All right, so let's backtrack. Paul talks all this vertical talk to everybody. You say, weren't we just talking about whatever you get in your spirit? That's really not the platform to be trying to get other people to do the same thing. When you read Paul's writings, how many times he challenged the independence of people, go back to Romans, starting around the 5th chapter, and go all the way through the 8th chapter. And he starts talking about grace, and he starts talking about sin not having rule over you. Now let's talk about what we think sin is. Is sin an act of something? But you won't know that in the average church, because they have the rule book. They get out the Jesus rules and go, well, if you're in violation of this, and that. It's like you get a ticket written. You're in violation of Article 4A subparagraph. Sin always involves us serving selfishness on some level. Sin always involves us serving fear on some level. And sin always involves us serving carnality on some level. Now, what did we say last week carnality was? Carnality is the rule of the senses, making decisions by the flesh. I know I have to drop a few pounds. So therefore, I really would like to have one of those sandwiches over there. But I have to cut out some bread. So what I had for a little dinner before I came over here was a salad. It wasn't a horrible salad. Thank God places do make good salads. But you say, well, are you saying that it would have been a sin to have a sandwich? No, I would have just been serving carnality. Because for me, I need to be a few pounds lighter. I got 5 kids to keep up with, plus I want to look sexier with age. Maybe I'll do the first preacher's pinup calendar or something, Send that to the people who make contributions to cause. I've got the makings of a 4-pack at least, and on the right day you can see the lines a little bit, but they need to be more visible. I got a drop. I'm not going to go letting clothes out and blah, 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 blah. But here's my point. It would have been the rule of I would have been serving carnality, meaning I would have made a decision on my flesh to eat something I know was going to put me now a day later in achieving my goal. When we sin, we always involve serving selfishness, fear, and carnality on some level. And carnality being the rule of the senses. we also serve one other thing when we sin. Ego. How did David justify not going to battle during a season when he should have been leading his army into battle? He stays home, puts his army in the hands of his subordinates. He's sitting, can't sleep at night, because when you're out of the will of God, you don't really have rest. He's looking out, peeking out, and he sees a woman bathing naked across the rooftop across the street. She was perfectly allowed. She wasn't trying to seduce anybody. All the men, including her husband, were supposed to be at war. He can't stop staring at her. He sends for her, gets her pregnant, has her. He justified his actions up until the point of his repentance by his ego. He makes the statement, am I not the king? Am I not the captain of all these armies? I can stay home if I want. When we sin, we always involve a piece of our ego, because that becomes the validation of either I'm important enough, or I don't deserve, or I deserve better, or, we justify it in so many egotistical ways. So just so you understand, sin involves all those factors. And here's how you know it really rarely has anything to do with defining an act. Because in the 51st Psalm, when David repented, which is known as the repentance psalm, he never mentions the act of adultery. He never mentions the act of murder and cover-up. He mentions serving himself in defiance of the will of God. And he says, against you, I've sinned. I defied you. Oh yeah, I hurt her. Ended up marrying her, and she went down as one of the better wives in history. Gave birth to a pretty smart kid named Solomon. But it's the ingredients that go into an act of sin. Ego is involved in vindictiveness. Ego is involved in revenge. Ego is involved in payback. Ego. Carnality, the rule of the senses. We do something based on what our feelings say we have validation to. So why are you talking about sin in Romans? Because Paul does all this speaking about challenging the independence of people. And then to the Romans, he starts talking to them about how that sin will not have dominion over you and rule over you. Why? He's talking about grace because sin is what kills our independence. If you want to self-destruct in your independence as a person, which is your God-given position, your God-created position, just involves sin in it. Sin is the opposite of your independence. You say, what if I'm independent enough to sin? No. Not the independence to live vertical with your Creator, vertical in life, vertical out of your spirit, proving all things to you, holding fast which is good, the freedom to live your journey, the freedom to discover, the freedom to grow without needing my rule book, my denomination, my systematic order, me telling you this is what the Bible really means, you finding it out for yourself. Well, this is what God's voice is going to really sound like when he talks to you. No, you finding it out for yourself. Well, these are the people you need to associate with if you want to be a good Christian. No, you finding it out for yourself. And then realizing that relationships are based on how people react and live out of their spirit, not how people live out of one slice of the theological religious pie. Am I making sense to you? I'm throwing some pretty good stuff here. I don't ask me to repeat that one. That was too long. Relationships are based out of the quality of how people live out of their spirit. We're using the Chinese restaurant next to the homeless encampment to feed all the lunches to the homeless encampment in Monterey. Well, I know for a fact they're devout Buddhists because I've eaten there over the years. I could care less. They're the sweetest people. They are graceful. They react to me when I walk in the door from their spirit. It's genuine. They were so happy that we're going to buy lots of lunches and feed people. Sin robs you of the prosperity of your freedom. Write that down. Sin robs you out of the prosperity that comes from living out of your freedom. He said, what does this have to do with Paul and Romans? You have to realize he's speaking to challenge the independence of people. And from that, he's saying, by the way, the thing that's going to rob you the most of your independence, the thing that grace is going to do to liberate you, you're going to mess it all up if you involve sin. So don't do it. He wasn't telling people to sin so God will be happy with them. God already decided to be happy with you. That's where we get the scripture. While we were yet sinners, Christ died. Somebody decided to love me way before I qualified for it. Aren't you happy for that? Takes the edge off. I've had to perform to please parents. I don't have to perform to please him. I have to do things that reflect his heart. His heart does not have a religion. His heart has things that progress his agenda. You'll get that one on the way home.
Sin robs you of the prosperity
that only comes from living out of your freedom. Sin robs you of the prosperity from living. So when Paul's talking to people, trying to challenge their independence, he goes through all this discourse about not serving sin. Why? Because sin is going to royally mess it up. And it's not gonna be sin that sends you to hell, and it's not gonna be sin that does all these, it's not gonna be sin that puts you on the bad side of God. It's gonna be sin that puts you on the wrong side of the prosperity you were created to live. Plain and simple. Am I making sense to anybody? Check what time it is. Oh, got to move on or else you're going to be stuck with me in this message next week. Don't let me teach you how to mature some things in your spirit. Document them, journal them. Be careful how much you share with any given person. Now, Lourdes wouldn't like this if she were sitting here, and so I'll say this because she's not. But I have things in my spirit that I have been just gushing to tell her, and I tell her, but she's not. She's dealing with a different piece of the pie. She's not less spiritual. She's not less mature. If I told you who she's been hanging with this whole week, business-wise, multi-conglomerate, multi-billion-dollar corporations that she's renewing their business. So she can hold her own. But if she's processing something different, or if she's in a different place, I lay something on her. Now she has to try to process what I'm trying to process. So there are things that will come in my spirit, and I hold them. And I hold them until they mature a little bit, till they reveal themselves. And then, I can share. Don't be the person who, when you get something in your spirit, it's like you got a secret for the first time, and you know what happened when you were a kid and you got a secret. The concept of secret never appealed to you being a secret. It was who you couldn't wait to tell. You nearly broke your head open rushing to get somebody on. You will never guess what I just heard. Don't be that about your spirit. Learn how to let some things mature. The other reason to keep it close to the vest is when God speaks in your spirit, it's based on what you can process, not what He can. So therefore, He can't give you what He can process. He can give you what you can. So there's likely one piece, and you need some more pieces. Let the pieces mature. Let them take on form. Is that making sense to you? Where does faith charge in the midst? Let me close with this. Where does faith renew you and pick you up in distressful and struggling times? It's when what you know in your spirit, even if it just pops in your spirit, you begin to declare it. Speak it. Not to the whole world, you. The blessing is I just stepped into to get a new computer last week. Now, it's not going to be much of a blessing if I can't figure out an Apple computer because I'm not used to working with Apple anything. So, if I'm not here, it's because I jumped off the Golden Gate with my Apple computer. The blessing that allowed me to procure that is something that came into my spirit a couple weeks prior to, and I didn't have any idea that my computer was going to crash while I'm sitting there typing what was going to be my next Sunday vertical soul post. And the motherboard just goes. Thankfully, they recovered it all at Geek Squad and blah, blah, blah. Point being is I walked the floor over a couple night period. Sleep interrupted, would get up, start praying in the Spirit. I started declaring different things being met. Now, I'm not saying this because this is the foolproof solution, and if you'll do it, you'll never have a problem. Because I could go home tonight and walk into World War III. What I'm saying is the beauty of living out of your spirit is the things that you know in your spirit, you declare them. You speak out on them. You act on them. That stirs faith. Faith is what saves you in the worst of times. Faith is what makes you take leaps when everybody else is running for cover. Faith is what makes you expand. Ray and I were having lunch today. We were talking about this very thing. About Apple, Steve Jobs. Napsters, all the people downloading all this illegal music. All the music business moguls are all melting down. Oh my God, we're losing billions of illegal downloads. Blah, 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 blah. Steve Jobs, it's like, no, you guys are looking at loss. I'm looking at a concept called iTunes. People can buy a song, not a whole CD. Saved the music business. It saved the music business. iTunes was the bailout. Point being is, Steve Jobs was taking a leap when everybody else was there. He just knew. He knew it. He knew it in his spirit. This thing's going to work. Why do I keep going with cause some days? Because I just know in my spirit it's going to work. They asked the person who created AOL. They asked the former CEO of AOL, they go, how did you, he goes, you know what? I just knew this was going to work, and I kept sticking with it until enough pieces came into fruition that it just popped one day, and we were off to the races. I just knew it. When you function from your spirit, you speak out. You don't speak sideways. There's no gossip in living out of your spirit. There's no accusations. There's no spreading lies. There's no betraying confidence. There's none of that. That's all the soul. When you speak from your spirit, you speak by what's clear for you. And it only has to be clear for you. 5 other people can be in the room and go, well, we believe this way. That's great. Happy for you. I could be sitting there with a glass of wine and I could have 5 religious zealots going, I don't think Christians should drink one. So, well, good for you. I guess the wine industry is not flourishing because of you people. It's like, and again, Paul even dealt with that. He was like, you people who don't believe in eating meat, or you don't believe in doing certain things on certain days of the week, then don't. But don't try to make converts out of it. Find your way. And that's the beauty of the vertical walk. Feedback. Questions?
One thing that popped into my head was when Mary was told that she was going to give birth. The last part of that whole story was Mary pondered those things in her heart.
Yeah, exactly. Mary pondered those things in her heart. The person she was going to give birth to was going to open his mouth and speak from his spirit. I and the Father are one. And they were going to try to throw him off a cliff for sounding so crazy. She's giving birth to the Son of God, being from a virgin state. Yeah, it's not anything you want going around the ladies' auxiliary meeting. Questions? What's some of you hearing this?
My stepdaughter took a job. She didn't like it. And she resigned. And it took a lot of guts to do that because she was and then she had 2 other jobs. So, but it was her intuition.
Right.
It was following her gut. That led her out of her spirit.
Right. I'm telling you, the spirit is such a strong thing. Do you realize that, what the cops call a hunch? That's their spirit. Why? Because when you're in the presence of a guilty party, there's the spirit of what is transgressed makes something evident in the environment. You don't.
That videotape the guy walking on top of the building?
Where?
In Boston, Marathon?
No.
I can't believe it. They're not on that one.
Yeah, they haven't played it. I've watched probably 2 hours of footage on that today, and they've not played that footage once. What is some of the rest of you here? Was something clear? Was this clear for you tonight?
Just further religiosity.
Right. The Spirit centers us. Our spirit is designed to center us. There is too much drama, and people don't just live in their own drama. They desire to make their drama your drama. And it's just got to step back and get centered. We good?
Yeah, good.
Father, I declare and speak clarity to everybody's spirit. May we, any bad fruit, may we change it and change history. When we change our fruit, we change our history. Give every person the strength to not look back. Open our spirit to mature and to live vertically. And may we not involve sin in that which was only designed to prosper by the gift of freedom. In Jesus' name, amen.